And dare I say, it's been a really good morning today as far as the traffic goes. We haven't really had any big slowdowns, no big backups, no accidents to report. It's been really good. I guess a few people not out on the highways this morning. Might see a pop-up showers yet this morning, and then that all should be clearing out. Tomorrow, partly cloudy, 66 for the high. For Thanksgiving, we're looking for a high of 71. Maybe some scattered showers, and could you actually see maybe a pop-up thunderstorm as well. Before that cooling trend kicks in on Friday, high of 58, and then overnight lows will be in the 30s and potentially in the 20s through the weekend and into next week. But right now, it's looking pretty good, and we are sitting at a high of 62 on 107.5 The Game.
Nine o'clock on your Tuesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Extra Point. Tyrod and Jack Beltry from Gamecock Central along with you here. As you heard on the sound, we're coming in. It is rivalry week. Are you feeling the hatred yet? Is it coursing through your veins, the hatred for all things orange, or are we there yet?
No, not yet, because I don't know. I'm just excited for the game, but once we get down to or up to Clemson, I guess. But I don't have a disdain for Clemson. I went to USC, and obviously Clemson's the rival and stuff, but I don't have any specific reason to hate them other than what we're told to hate them.
Hey, the fact that they wear orange is enough hate for me.
Orange is, look.
Orange is a gaudy color. Orange is what they put prisoners in.
Their color of orange is not good. The only orange color I could actually accept is probably a burnt orange. I think that actually looks decent now.
I accept no oranges.
No orange.
Clemson, Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, Texas, no orange for me.
Not pumpkin orange, man.
Not pumpkin orange. No, I despise all things orange, and Clemson's right there in that way. So obviously we got plenty to talk about this week, and what is a very evenly matched for a lot of ways matchup between Clemson and South Carolina. When you look at what both teams have done so far this season and kind of where their strengths and weaknesses are up to this point.
No, I definitely think this is about as close of a matchup as you're going to get. I feel like the last few years have definitely been like that. Like last year, even though Clemson was kind of on a roll, you felt like South Carolina, even though they're at 5-6, it was kind of like, yeah, they can go out here and potentially win this game. And they didn't look they didn't play well enough. But, it was a close game to where, if some things had gone South Carolina's way, they could have won.
Well, in Clemson, they got to the mountaintop of college football for a couple of years there where they were winning national championships and if nothing else, playing in the national championship or semifinal games. They've come back down to earth a little bit. Since the 2020 season, they have not made the college football playoffs. Still a very good, very solid program that is in position right now to still win potentially 10 games or maybe more and maybe make their way into the playoffs if they continue to win. But they're not that dominant force that they were for the better part of a decade where they completely owned South Carolina. It feels like it's kind of reverting back to the median a little bit, where, again, Carolina did not win the game last year, but it was one of those things that, man, if they don't give up that touchdown on the first play of the game last year, because they didn't allow Clemson in the end zone a single time on defense, you wonder what could have happened there. So it doesn't feel like either team is coming in at a huge disadvantage this weekend.
No, this isn't like 2016 where South Carolina gets beat 56-7 and then the game's over on the first drive after Clemson scores. These games are a lot more competitive now, and look, both teams are going to be ranked. I know we'll talk about hopefully inside the top 15 like they should be, and it's going to set up for one of the bigger games of the weekend in our opinions. And I feel like Carolina, look, it's been a lot more competitive over the years. Obviously, 2 years ago, going to Clemson, winning that game last year, a little bit closer. I feel like it's probably now or never to kind of start showing like, hey, South Carolina can be the dominant team like Clemson had been during the 2010s.
Yeah, we'll certainly get into plenty of this as the week goes along. You mentioned the rankings. I want to get to those to start things off here in just a moment. But it is 9 o'clock, and of course, we've got to start things off with our Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up.
Time to get hyped.
Here's your 9 a.m. Sandstorm.
Sponsored by George Sink Injury Lawyers. Just call all nines.
It is time for your 9 a.m. Sandstorm Pick-Me-Up, brought to you by South Carolina's largest injury law firm, George Sink Injury Lawyers. If you've been hurt in the car or at work, call George Sink now at 803-ALL-9s. Of course, it is Tuesday night. That means we get another round of the college football playoff top 25 ahead of the final week of the regular season and rivalry week. And, of course, we went into last weekend thinking, okay, Carolina's chances are not zero, but they're not great either. But then all the chaos unfolded to where we came in yesterday and talked about it all day long and said, well, maybe there is a chance here for Carolina to potentially sneak their way into the playoffs if things continue to go right for them going through this weekend. I want to kind of look, because it was such a chaotic weekend, at what we can kind of anticipate or think the committee is going to do with tonight's rankings. Because, again, you got a lot of movement around the top 10, teams outside the top 10 that sets us up for the final week of the regular season. And again, South Carolina's last chance to prove a point because they're not going to be playing on conference championship weekend.
Yeah, look, they have to go out with a bang this weekend, and I think style points matter this weekend. Like, yeah, there's the sentiment out there that once you have the game in hand, you shouldn't be running up the score and stuff, but I mean, look, this is a different time in college football where, look, if you're a team like South Carolina or even Clemson in this case, where you need to have a big dominant win to show that you're for real to the committee, you got to go out here and maybe try to run up the score. If you're up by a bunch, run it up. And that way it looks like, oh, that was a really big blowout win.
Yeah, if you could beat Clemson by 14 or 17, assuming that they are higher ranked than you, that's pretty convincing. And that would be one final, data point for Carolina to make towards the committee. And again, I think they're going to need a little bit of help too. But it's good to be in the conversation. I'll say that much.
No, it's a lot more fun talking about football in general when the team we cover is in the mix. And look, it may not go Carolina's way ultimately, but I mean, look, if they beat Clemson this weekend, I think that is more than good enough for right now, and we'll just let the cards play out.
So, and we look at the top 25, 1 through 4, likely not going to change. Oregon was on a bye, not going to change there. Ohio State obviously beat Indiana at number 2. Texas won against Kentucky, and then Penn State barely actually escaped Minnesota. But I don't expect to see any change. Those should still be your same 1 through 4 coming up tonight.
I agree. I think the 1 through 4 is about normal as it gets, and then 5 through 12 will be, there's going to be a lot of change, I think.
There is, and when you look, so obviously Indiana was number 5. Notre Dame, number 6, picked up a dominant win over a number 19 Army team, so that is something significant for them. So I think it makes a lot of sense they would just kind of naturally move up to the number 5 spot. Again, I still don't think they're being penalized as much as they should be for that Northern Illinois loss, but it is what it is at this point in time. And Notre Dame is kind of that team, we've been talking about, the SEC getting this many teams in, the Big Ten getting this many teams in, the Big 10, the Big 12, and the ACC maybe being one big leagues, and Notre Dame's just kind of been sitting there, not being talked about as much, essentially taking a spot for one of these other 4 power conferences.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Like the Northern Illinois loss, it should hold a little bit more weight just because it's like you lost to a team that went 6-5. Nevertheless, you lost to a group of 5 team. It's different from like Alabama or Kentucky, or I'm sorry, who am I thinking of? Who's the other team that? Ole Miss that lost to Kentucky or whatever. Like that's different because they lost to SEC teams. You lost to a group of 5 MAC school,
sure.
And so I think that needs to hold some weight. But because the committee loves Notre Dame, I think they're just going to move up 1 spot.
So Alabama came in at and again, Indiana was number 5. We know they're going to drop. We'll get to them in a moment. Alabama was number 7. They, of course, fell to Oklahoma in a very ugly 21-point loss there. That makes me assume that Miami's going to jump all the way up from 8 to number 6, which puts the ACC in an interesting position.
Yeah.
Because we thought they were going to be a one-bid league. However, let's say it's Miami and SMU in the conference championship game. SMU beats Miami. I think you make a strong case that a 10-2 or 11-2, a 11-2 Miami team might have a shot at making the playoff at that point in time and getting 2 teams in.
And it depends how that game goes. Now, if Miami gets spanked by SMU, then I think that changes things a little bit. But I think if Miami and SMU play a close game, it comes down to like a touchdown or a field goal, I think you need to put both teams in. But again, it depends on what happens elsewhere around the country. Like, what happens if, we've had this discussion earlier this week, what if Texas A&M runs the table and wins the SEC as a 3-loss team? What do you do with Georgia? What do you do with Texas as a 2-loss team? You have to consider all these other things, and you kind of have to go to the, this team versus that team. How would you kind of stack them up with one another?
So, again, I think Miami probably slides up to number 6 coming up tonight. Ole Miss was behind them at number 9. They obviously lost. And this is where you get to, I think, the 2 biggest winners of the entire weekend with Georgia and Tennessee, who came in at 10 and 11. And at the time of the rankings last week, Georgia occupied the last at-large spot in the college football playoff top 25, and Tennessee was the first team on the outside looking in. So I think it only makes sense that you're moving those teams up to the 7 and 8 spots and a lot more comfortably in the top 25, where Tennessee, seemingly, assuming they beat Vanderbilt this weekend, is in the best position of anybody because they don't have to play the SEC championship game next weekend. Georgia has to play either Texas or Texas A&M, where I assume the loser would still get in, but I don't know that for sure. So if Georgia suffered a 3rd loss in the title game, they might be in danger of falling out. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's where it gets kind of to become a slippery slope. But I think for right now, after the top 4, I think you see Notre Dame at 5. Miami, it would make sense to move them up to 6. I think you move Georgia up to 7, and then Tennessee behind them at 8, partially just because, well, a lot of teams have lost, but also Georgia over Tennessee makes sense. And then at 9, I think honestly you go with Boise at 9 or SMU. I don't know. I mean, look, a lot of teams lost to where it's like, I mean, how do you stack this up?
This is where it gets interesting because, again, what we've done essentially with 1 through 8 is just moved everybody up because teams in front of them lost. So that's really easy here. The question becomes, and I agree, I think Boise has a good shot at being number 9 because, again, they were 12 and you move them up 3 spots for the 3 teams in front of them that lose. Okay, where are we putting Indiana? Where do we put Alabama and where do we put Ole Miss? Because Indiana has only suffered 1 loss this season. That loss is to number 2 Ohio State. If Alabama and Ole Miss won this weekend and the rest of the top 10 stayed in place, I think Indiana is at serious risk of falling to like 12th or 13th. However, given the fact that a bunch of other teams behind them lost as well, I think you're probably putting them at number 10. Again, their resume is not that impressive, but still, 10 wins is 10 wins, even in a conference like the Big Ten where your schedule wasn't as hard considering the teams that you played. I would be really shocked if they fell farther than that.
They're going to be still inside the top 12. I think they're at 10. I think at 11, you probably move up SMU a spot. I would like to put SMU over Indiana. However, I just can't see Indiana dropping past 10. And then I think the other argument is, okay, how far does Arizona State move up? Do they move past South Carolina, past Clemson? Because I think your 11 through 14 is a combination of Ole Miss, in no particular order, by the way, Ole Miss, Bama, Clemson, and South Carolina.
I think, and again, we're assuming this, like you said, we'll put SMU at 11 there. I think because both Alabama and Ole Miss both have wins over Georgia, which, again, we're moving up to theoretically number 7 here. I think that holds a lot of weight, and I think that could still keep them ahead of a Clemson. So let's kind of go in order here. I think, considering Alabama's loss was worse, I think you got Ole Miss at 12, and I think you've got Alabama at 13. Probably Clemson at 14, and then South Carolina at 15. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's just, I don't know, man. Like, I would drop back Ole Miss further, but 3 spots doesn't feel like enough for a team that you just lost to that just clinched bowl eligibility.
This is what hurts Carolina, though, is the fact that you lost to both these teams, Alabama
that's
and
what's
Ole
holding
Miss.
them back.
Now, the Alabama loss a lot closer, and again, came down to the very end of the game. Ole Miss came in here and dominated you.
Yeah.
And look, the committee is not afraid to rank teams ahead of teams that have beaten them. They had Alabama 4 spots ahead of Tennessee this past week. They had South Carolina ahead of LSU a couple weeks ago. But I think the thorough beating that Ole Miss put on Carolina, there is no conceivable way where I think they would put them ahead of Ole Miss until Ole Miss loses the 4th game.
I would say Ole Miss needs to be ahead of South Carolina. I would, if Alabama weren't at 7 originally and flip the spots, like say Alabama was at 9, I would have put Alabama behind South Carolina, but I don't think you can drop Alabama after losing it. Well, I mean, they did get blown out by Oklahoma.
And
that's the thing.
That's the thing, is it's an ugly loss to a bad team. So how much are you penalized for that? And quite frankly, we have to bring this up. How much does the name matter here?
It matters a lot.
Alabama holds a lot of weight.
You know, honestly, I think you put Ole Miss ahead of South Carolina and Clemson. And honestly, man, I think you put Alabama at 15. I just think they need to be dropped a ton because they got blown out by Oklahoma, a team that wasn't very good.
We'll see what happens tonight. This is what makes this so interesting, because now we have 12 teams to have to rank instead of just 4. So we'll see what happens tonight. Last night, men's basketball in action taking on Xavier. We'll dive into that as well as what Coach Paris had to say after the game. Coming up next, it's the Extra Point. Tyler and Jack here on the game. Tyrad here once again telling you about our friends over at Canty Foundation Specialists. I don't know if you've checked the forecast, but we are expecting a little bit of rain later on this week on Thanksgiving. And rain on a holiday is never fun, but rain in general can also cause issues with your crawl space. If you have an open one underneath your home, it could create standing water, which can create things like high humidity and condensation in your crawl space for mold, mildew, and pests, including things like termites. That moisture can also lead to wood rot and floor joist problems as well, because musty smells and awful odors that come from the mold and mildew in your crawl space can cause health issues for you and your family, like runny nose, itchy eyes, coughs, because about half the air that you breathe in your home comes from your crawl space. That's where our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists come in. If you have issues with your crawl space or foundation, go online to cantyconvix.com and schedule an appointment. They'll send a professional out to your home to evaluate your crawl space and get it fixed right so you and your family can live comfortably. Again, go online to schedule an appointment today at cantyconvix.com for our friends at Canty Foundation Specialists.
see if the freshman can get something going. He will. He gets a screen from Murray Boyles, and no one's picked him up. But Cam Scott goes right to the bucket and puts down the two-hand dunk.
Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyra and Jack Belcher along with you on your Tuesday here on the game. That was called last night. Derek Scott, as the Gamecocks took on the Xavier Musketeers in the Fort Myers tip-off. Unfortunately, the Musketeers come out on top 75-66 as Carolina, again, struggles a little bit with a better team, much like they did with Indiana the other weekend, as it's been a choppy start of the season, to say the least. And look, it's a long year. We haven't even gotten close to conference play yet, but I'm not getting the same vibes from this team from the one I had a year ago.
No, I'm definitely not either. And the thing is, they played well in the first half in this game, but once you got out of halftime, right from the jump, Xavier just looked like they were a much better team, much more prepared, and Carolina was sloppy, and I think there were a lot of things that went wrong in this second half for this team.
Yeah, so Xavier got out to the 7-0 lead right out of the gate, and it kind of looked like, oh no, is Carolina going to lose handle of this very quickly? And Carolina immediately turned around, went on a 17-0 run themselves, thinking, okay, this could be interesting. How to lead at halftime. But yeah, that second half was a completely different story. It just seemed like they kind of fell apart there. And it goes back to something that we've really been talking about a lot this year, unfortunately, with this team. The effort didn't seem like it was there as much in the second half. Weren't willing to be quite as physical as they needed to against a recently ranked top 25 team in Xavier, and that ended up being a big part of the difference there in the second half of this game.
No, you're most definitely right. I feel like Xavier was crashing to the boards, grabbing rebounds. They had so many second chance opportunities in this game, and they dominated in the offensive rebound battle. Like, it was 12-4, which is not good at your South Carolina. And you went out in the portal and replenished. You brought in Nick Pringle, and he only had 3 rebounds last night, and he got into so much foul trouble early on. That was a big story from last night, was that. But also, man, the turnovers, like, it was sloppy. I mean, they had, 12 turnovers, and Xavier had 20 points off those turnovers. Like, yep. You're not going to win many games when teams are taking advantage of your mistakes like that.
Let's hear from Coach Paris after the game. Cut number 5 here, Corey. This is him talking about the offensive rebounding issues last night.
Yeah, I mean, a couple times we got punked, to be quite honest. I think a couple times we just got punked. It's one guy standing there and another guy standing there, and it may not be either guy's advantage. Sometimes it might be your advantage. You're in front, typically, and just didn't make it happen. We got physically manhandled on at least 2 of them that I know, but my guess is that there were probably a couple more than that. And they're physical and play a physical brand of basketball, but just didn't do it. We just didn't play. We didn't play well enough overall. They looked excited. We would have been excited had we won. They should be excited. We played hard. We competed hard. We have a good team. We have to really figure out what our identity is and continue to play to those things. But when we needed, we pulled out some really good shots when we needed to, some good shot opportunities, and so we did some good things.
And like you mentioned a moment ago, Nick Pringle and Colin Murray Boyles, 2 best rebounders for this team, spent a lot of the game in foul trouble. Murray Boyles ends up fouling out before the game is over, so that certainly didn't help there. But I go back to something that Coach Paris mentioned there in that little clip. They're still trying to find their identity. I don't know what this team is necessarily. I don't think anybody does.
I don't really know either. And one thing I can say after watching these last few games, and Elijah Campbell's made a good point on this throughout the last few games too, the offense I feel like needs to run through Colin Murray Boyles. Like, you see when he's out there on the floor what kind of difference he makes, and even when he's not out there, there were times in that game last night where maybe South Carolina is leading by a few points, and then as soon as he comes out of the game, the entire momentum of the game swings. And whether that's due to him getting in foul trouble or him just taking a rest on the bench, it makes a big difference when he's not out there on the floor. And that's kind of, we've known that right? And so South Carolina's really got to figure out how to incorporate him more, as if they don't enough already, into what they do.
Well, and the big matchup last night was between Colin Murray-Boyles and Zach Freemantle from Xavier. And I thought Murray-Boyles did a really good job of holding his own early in that game and got a couple quick fouls on Freemantle that put him in foul trouble as well. So I think he was doing a very good job. And like you said, it seems like the team's going to run through his success. When he's having a great night, the team's going to have a great night. When he's not having a great night, the team's probably not going to have a great night. Again, he got pushed all around against Indiana the other weekend. Guess what? The team ended up losing. And again, last night spent a lot of time not on the court because of the being in the foul trouble and eventually fouling out, and the team suffered because of it. So I don't know what you change necessarily or how you go about that differently to kind of build around him more, because I feel like you already kind of are to a degree, but he really is the straw that stirs the drink with this team, it seems like.
No, he most definitely is. And the other problem is I just don't feel like they have the guys that can go out there and be your reliable go-to players. Like, again, Pringle, he did not do too much last night, and Jamari Thomas went 3 of 10. Jacoby Wright was fine, and look, they hit some key shots when they needed to, but by the end of the game, it's like, yeah, they were fighting, but it's like you're playing from behind so often in that game, and when you make all these mistakes and stuff, it's going to compound, and it's going to be too tough to overcome. So Carolina's just got to kind of figure out how to limit those mistakes and force Xavier to make mistakes, because they were doing a decent job of that in the final minutes last night. It just didn't matter as much because the game was kind of already in hand for Xavier.
Yeah, and it was one of those kind of things. And give credit again, South Carolina did have the lead at halftime here, and I thought they did a pretty good job shooting nearly 50% in that first half. But the second half was a completely different story, where they dipped to 38%, and it seems like Xavier couldn't miss anything in the second half, and they ended up running away with it at the end.
No, I mean, look, they give them a lot of credit. They are a very solid team. But for South Carolina, I mean, look, you're not going to win games when you go 1 of 8 from three-point range in the second half and you only shoot 38% in that second half and you have 8 turnovers. Like, that is not winning basketball right there. And you just, I don't even know, like, the identity of this team. It felt like, oh, they're going to be a three-point shooting team. But I don't know. I mean, I thought they were going to be enforcers in the paint in the beginning of the year. It doesn't really feel like that. We just don't know what to make of this team, and that's a real problem. I know it's only 6 games, but it's very early, and there's just so many problems right now.
Yeah, they'll play Virginia Tech coming up tomorrow night. 6 o'clock is the third-place game in the Fort Myers tip-off, and we can dive into that matchup a little bit more coming up tomorrow. But, again, it just seems like this team is not quite on the level of where they were a year ago. Now, they are playing a more difficult non-conference schedule than they played last year, but still, regardless, it's just not quite clicking the way you want it to.
No, and I think there's 6 games. They just haven't played a complete performance yet, even against the teams that they've dominated. Like, they need to just settle in, figure it out, and have a game where everything is pretty much spotless.
It is Tuesday. We will hit our NFL top 5, bottom 5 coming up next. But I want to remind you, post-game show today is part of Rivalry Week. Going to be hanging out at Cato's Power Equipment at 4D12 Beltline Boulevard. Jay and Elijah going from 3 until 6. Come by and see them, where you can register for your chance to win tickets to see Carolina Clemson football, Carolina Clemson men's basketball, and Carolina Clemson baseball. Win tickets to all 3 of those games. Stop by and register. We'll announce a winner come Friday morning at 7:30 on the early game. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Tuesday here on The Game. Red once again telling you about our friends over at Twin Peaks. It's a holiday week and a fun time as always to be over at Twin Peaks. This week they have their Black Friday costume party going on all week long through the end of the week. You can try some epic handcrafted cocktails through Friday, November the 29th, like the Wild Turkey 101 Stone Sour, Hennessy Spicy Mango Lemonade, or the Traveler Gold Rush. And on Black Friday, of course, got plenty of football happening as well. You can come in and check out the matchup between the Chiefs and and the Raiders kicking off at 3 o'clock, and tailgate and score baller deals all day long as the Black Friday costume party wraps up. I tell you about it all the time. TVs as far as the eye can see, delicious food, and of course those 29-degree draft beers. There is never, ever a bad time to be out at Twin Peaks, including this week with our friends down in the Vista. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyrad and Jack Velch from Gamecock Central along with you on your Tuesday. Here on the game, as we do each and every Tuesday, it's time for our NFL Top 5, Bottom 5. But first, we've got to start off with who did the heavy lifting over the weekend. I don't think there's a better candidate for this award than Saquon Barkley. 26 carries, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns, a fantasy owner's dream. I think he scored 50 points. I think he scored 50 points, depending on what kind of league you're in, with fantasy on Sunday, in helping the Eagles roll past the Rams 37-20 on Sunday Night Football.
I think he's glad he's no longer with the Giants. I think he's very happy. And, you know, I'm seeing on screen right here on TV that does Saquon Barkley have a legit MVP case? I think he does. I think, look, the quarterbacks usually win the MVP award more times than not. But then you have special seasons like 2012 Adrian Peterson where he's just running over everyone. That's kind of how it feels here with Saquon, like 255 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he's also a great receiving back. Like, the fact that he's doing these types of things, it doesn't happen all too often. It's special, and I think it deserves at least some recognition in that vein.
Yeah, kind of looking at the numbers here, I mean, he and Derrick Henry are actually pretty darn close to each other. Both guys over 1,300 yards on the ground. Derrick Henry has more touchdowns with 13 compared to Saquon Barkley's 10. So if you're going to say Barkley's in conversation for the MVP race, I think Derrick Henry also has to be as well. But like you said, it takes very special seasons for running backs to be able to be quarterbacks for this award. But both those guys certainly on pace for that happening.
For reference, AP in 2012 went 2,097 yards. I think you need more than 2,000 yards to at least have a chance. But again, it's going to probably take a bit, considering how much of a quarterback award this usually is.
Well, and looking at it here, Saquon Barkley has ran for over 100 yards in 5 out of his last 6 games, compared to only running for over 100 yards in 1 out of the first 5 games of the season. So certainly heating up, and obviously with the Eagles, still being in the mix with the playoffs and leading the AFC East NFC East as of right now, certainly keeps him in contention for that kind of award. But yeah, like you said, he's glad he's not a Giant anymore, to say the least. And that whole thing from Hard Knocks about them negotiating and letting him go to Philadelphia, that is something that I think is going to haunt Giants fans for a very long time.
Yep, and it's what's going to get Joe Shane and Brian Dable probably fired in a few weeks here.
As we go into our NFL top 5, bottom 5, I'll be honest with you, my list didn't change a whole lot from last week. Detroit Lions stay at the top after yet another dominant performance against the Colts on Sunday. This team is fun to watch from the standpoint of I know they're having fun. I always like to listen to Dan Campbell's post-game locker room speech where he's handing out game balls, and again, they're running gadget plays, and they're just a fun football team to watch, and legitimately, I think is the best overall team in football right now.
They're the team to beat easily. Number 1 for me, for sure, and they are just unbelievable right now. Like, they only allowed 6 points for the second straight game, and this is a team that is good in every aspect. They're great defensively. They are great on offense. I mean, again, this is like, I think they're better than the Chiefs right now for sure, and I think they have all the talent in the world to go out here and win a Super Bowl.
So that's your number 1 as well?
Yes.
Number 2 for me, they're on a bye this week. Didn't really change. Buffalo obviously coming off of the big win against Kansas City, handing them their first loss of the season the other week. Now, they do have a matchup coming up very soon with the Lions, but besides that, a very manageable schedule. I think it's either this weekend or next weekend that they could lock up the AFC East already. It was this weekend. It's this weekend. If they win this weekend, they can actually lock up the AFC East with still a month to go in the regular season.
Yeah, they're my number 2 as well. So if the Bills beat the 49ers on Sunday Night Football and the Dolphins lose to the Packers on Thanksgiving, the Bills will have already locked up the AFC East. And it makes sense because they're 9-2 right now. However, I think the Dolphins are probably going to end up maybe winning this week. I think they're going to keep it alive just because Tua has been playing so well. But I will say the Bills on a bye, this is getting hot at the right time. Obviously, they've been playing great. The bye comes at a good point, and now they get a 49ers team that is pretty banged up and not looking too hot.
Yeah, again, the 49ers are kind of the ultimate what could have been. Obviously, Brock Purdy's out right now. Brandon Allen playing for him. McCaffrey's come back, but he had a key fumble the other day against the Packers, so definitely doesn't look like another return trip to the Super Bowl for the 49ers by any means.
No, most definitely not. And speaking of the 49ers, the team that beat them, the Chiefs. I mean, look, this is they find a way every time. They're my number 3, and I got to give them credit. Like, they're 10-1, but it is not a pretty 10-1. Like, the Panthers took them down to the wire the other day, and look, you give Mahomes and that offense, even when they're not clicking, a little bit of time on the clock at the end of the game, they're going to go down and win, especially when they need a field goal.
I agree with you. Chiefs at number 3, still finding ways to win, minus what happened against Buffalo. 13 straight one-score wins, including in the playoffs. That is an NFL record by the way, and I look ahead to the Black Friday game they're playing against the Raiders, a now Desmond Ritter-led Raiders team. They might actually win that game by multiple scores. Like that, this may be their best chance to beat a team by more than a touchdown. Because again, I'm not expecting too much out of that team.
They should, but again, who knows with this Chiefs team? They play it very close, and they end up winning. That's what good teams do.
My number 4 team was in the Super Bowl a couple years ago against the Chiefs. The Philadelphia Eagles, just talked about Saquon Barkley a few minutes ago, playing at an MVP caliber level, and their defense, very good, only allowed more than 20 points twice this year. Jalen Hurts playing very well, playing very effectively. This is a team we weren't so sure about coming into the year because of how they ended last season on the long losing streak and the conversation of the inner fighting in the locker room and the head coach Sirianni and all that kind of stuff, but they've righted the ship and they're playing some of the best football right now.
Yeah, the Eagles are my number 4 as well. They have been rolling. I was wrong about them and the Commanders being the team to beat in the NFC East. The Eagles have been taking care of business, and they're my number 4 as well. A really solid team. Saquon, obviously great. Jalen Hurts has been playing well, and that defense has been playing pretty solid as well.
My number 5 comes in, picking up the win last night on Monday Night Football over the LA Chargers, that being the Baltimore Ravens, who, again, outside of playing the Browns outside of playing the Browns and the Steelers past couple weeks have looked as good as usual. It's just something about those divisional games that keeps on biting them. They're actually behind the Steelers right now as far as the AFC East, as far as the AFC North standings are concerned. I still think the Ravens have a bigger upside when it's all said and done at the end of the season. But again, it doesn't matter what you're doing in November. It doesn't matter what you're doing in December. Can you finally beat a Chiefs team in the playoffs is the big question around this team.
Dang, I thought we would have agreed on top 5 for once, but number 5 for me, I'm going the Minnesota Vikings. I know they have played their last 4 games, Colts, Jags, Titans, Bears. They've won all those games, and those are pretty easy games for them to win. But they're 9-2 on the year. They're rolling. Sam Darnold had a pretty good game the other day. They just find ways to win. And I don't know how far they're going to go in the playoffs, but they are pretty solid this year.
I actually had Minnesota in my top 5 until the Ravens won last night. So Minnesota's like my 5.1 as of right now. They're finding ways to win, much like the Chiefs are. Again, I keep thinking the Sam Darnold train's going to run out of steam, and it hasn't yet.
No, he's been very solid this year, and that's a credit to Kevin O'Connell and the team they got in general. Very good team out there in Minnesota.
We had our NFL Bottom 5 coming up to wrap up today's edition of the Extra Point Reminder. Since things are a little bit different this week with the holiday coming up on Thursday, Carolina Calls will actually be tonight with Coach Beamer at 6 o'clock right here on The Game in Columbia. Again, Carolina Calls tonight with Coach Beamer ahead of Saturday's matchup against the Clemson Tigers. It is the Extra Points. Our head and Jack Belcher along with you on your Tuesday here on The Game. Welcome back in. It is the Extra Point. Tyler Head and Jack Beltry along with you on your Tuesday here on the game. As you've been hearing, it is Rivalry Week, sponsored by our friends over at Columbia Craft on Green Street, down in the Vista. I said a little bit earlier on the show, friends don't let friends wear orange. So if you have somebody that shows up to your Thanksgiving on Thursday wearing orange, you ask them politely, yet swiftly, to leave.
Yeah.
That's how this should be.
You're right. You're right. I can't disagree with you on that.
Yeah, it's like, looking, not this week.
No.
Not this week.
Not this week.
Plenty more to get into for that rivalry game as the day and the week goes along. Wrapping up today's edition of the Extra Point, we'll get into our NFL bottom five. And I want to give credit, first of all, to Dallas, because they did win a wild game. 41 points in the last 9 minutes between them and the Washington Commanders, obviously a divisional game in the NFC East. So I will give them points for actually winning that game, but that doesn't ease the misery of what the Cowboys are in the midst of dealing with right now. Obviously, Dak hurt. Mike McCarthy's a dead man walking. You have an owner that's hapless to a large degree. It's not going to get any better. A momentary reprieve of joy with the win on Sunday.
Yeah, look, they've been playing a little bit better, but again, they still have a long way to go to even consider getting back in the playoff hunt. Got a good chance to win this week against a team that you should probably kill with Tommy DeVito and stuff and the Giants, but look, there's still a lot of issues with the Cowboys.
Well, I think that game is on Fox, I believe, the 4:30 game.
CBS, Fox, and then Peacock.
How upset do you think are the executives at Fox Sports thinking they were going to get a Daniel Jones, Dak Prescott matchup in the middle of the day on Thanksgiving, and now you get Tommy DeVito and Cooper Rush?
Oh, joyful. I'm sure they're happy. I'm sure. But, they get Big D on national television. I think that's all that matters.
They do. And here's the thing about, Thanksgiving football. You don't always have to be engaged in the game. It's just what you have on. And, if you're eating Thanksgiving dinner at 5 o'clock, you have that on in the living room. And that way, when you're done eating, you go in there and you can take a nap. And the good thing about this year's game between those two teams, it doesn't really mean anything. So if you miss most of the game because you fell asleep or busy eating pie or whatever, then you're not really missing out on much.
Exactly. It's not even that big of a deal. And should be. Hopefully, it's an entertaining game on Thursday.
Who's your number 28?
Number 28 for me, the Chicago Bears, a new team in the mix. I was going to put the Cowboys, but then they won this weekend. So, look, the Bears have lost, I think, 5 straight. They just haven't been playing great. I know they went to overtime with the Vikings, and it took a last-ditch effort to even get there with 17 fourth-quarter points. I just don't think they're very good. Caleb Williams played a little bit better, but Matt Eberflus, I think he is a dead man walking. If the Bears don't make the playoffs this year, I think he's getting canned.
Well, it could have been the past 2 weeks with the block kicked against the Packers, and now, like you said, the loss in overtime to Minnesota. So they're losing, but they're not getting dominated. So there's that at least.
Yeah, there's that, but there are a lot of better teams, I think, in front of them.
Number 29 for me, Las Vegas. Gardner Minshew goes down with the collarbone injury on Sunday. They're now down to Desmond Ridder. As a Falcons fan, I know what the Desmond Ridder experience is. It's not going to be good. They're already, essentially pushing Antonio Pierce out the door. It's going to be a tear-down rebuild here before long.
No, most definitely. I'll have the Raiders in my bottom 5 in a second. But first, New England at number 29. Just not a good football team. Nothing really to be said. They got a lot of issues. Young quarterback. They're not that good.
Number 30 for me, New York Jets. They were on a bye this past week. Doesn't change that it's rough up there in New Jersey for the Jets. Obviously moved on from the general manager. You've already fired the head coach. Aaron Rodgers looks like he's 40 years old and coming off an Achilles injury. It's not getting any better, and it doesn't help that you're in a division with one of the most dominant teams in the NFL and the Buffalo Bills right now.
I honestly forgot the Jets existed, so I'm going to scratch what I said about the Bears, put the Jets at number 28 because they stink.
I know when a team's on a bye,
there were so many teams on a bye this week.
It takes them out of your mind for a minute. But no, I wanted to make sure the Jets were still in my bottom 5.
Sorry, Bears fans. But I will say number 30 for me, the Las Vegas Raiders. This is a god-awful football team. Antonio Pierce probably should be fired at the end of the year. They got so many problems. That's the thing with all these bottom 5 teams, man. They just horrendous from top to bottom.
Number 31 for me, New England Patriots. Look, it's a rebuilding year. You're trying to get Drake May up to speed as an NFL quarterback. I'm not hating on them. They're just not playing great football right now.
No, number 31 for me, Jacksonville Jaguars. Just not. I don't know. I mean, look, I think Doug Peterson's gone at the end of the year, and I mean, look, they're just. I just don't think they're very good.
My rankings fluctuate quite a bit week to week, really, and it does rely on a lot of what happened this past weekend. Giants got to be my number 32. Dysfunction everywhere. The Daniel Jones thing was ugly. Obviously, it doesn't help that Saquon Barkley is doing what he's doing out there in Philadelphia. It looked like they weren't trying on Sunday. It looked like they put in minimal effort in their loss. Tommy DeVito is not going to get you anything at quarterback. It's a sad state of affairs for the Giants.
I don't think I'd be saying that the Giants are worse than the Jets, but here we are. The Giants, number 32 for me. I mean, absolutely abysmal. I mean, Brian Dable, Joe Shane, they're both getting fired at the end of the year. At least they should be. Tommy DeVito, he's not even a quarterback. Just not a good one. And they have so many problems right now. They don't show any effort. They're passing blame around. I mean, it's a disaster out there.
Well, and, Malik Neighbors in the locker room after the game calling out coaching. And this dude's not even been in the league for a year, and he's already sick of the you-know-what of what's happening above him.
It's got to be the most toxic locker room to be in right now because they are just a train wreck, and there's no slowing down it anytime soon.
Well, there's entertainment in train wrecks, and as long as you're not a fan of that fan base, watching them suffer can actually be entertaining.
And maybe that's why Thanksgiving on Thursday with the Giants and Cowboys can be a really entertaining game.
You can watch two of the bigger brands in the NFL just suffer with one another.
Yes. The only thing I wish that Daniel Jones was ultimately signed by the Cowboys. That would have been like when he popped up on the roster on the Cowboys website. I'm like, no way. Jerry Jones has the chance to do the funniest thing of the season.
They'll have to settle for Cooper Rush, unfortunately.
Yeah. I guess he doesn't have enough time to learn the playbook, so Cooper Rush will do.
Again, that might be the game you want to end up napping through on Thanksgiving. We'll preview some of those games coming up tomorrow, as well as the Black Friday game. Again, Chiefs and Raiders coming up on Friday as the NFL continues to take over more and more days of the week, it seems like.
Yep. Hey, looking forward to it. This is always a good time of year, regardless of how the teams are.
Absolutely. That'll do it for the Extra Point. Coming up next, the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Myself and Chris Clark on your Tuesday on the game. 10 o'clock on your Tuesday morning. Welcome in as the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you on this holiday week, rivalry week, getting you set for the Gamecocks and Clemson coming up on Saturday. I mentioned at the beginning of the last hour with Jack, my entry for hatred with Clemson is the fact they wear orange. I despise any team that wears orange. So if you had to pick just one reason as to why you might hate Clemson, what goes to the top of the list for you?
Oh, man. No, Mike.
1 second.
Here I am.
There you go. There you are. All right. Anyways,
The light is on.
My hatred for Clemson begins with the fact they wear orange. Tennessee, Auburn, Florida, Texas. Any team with orange is a no-go for me.
Well, is it you just don't like orange, or the teams that you grew up being taught to dislike happen to wear orange?
Both.
Yeah.
I'm just not a fan of orange in general. So the fact that Clemson wears orange, that's an easy starter for me. Like, boom, that's all I need. And there's other reasons after that, but that's the igniting the flame,
Well,
so to speak.
You know, so I have an interesting background, and I think a lot of Gamecock fans would say yes, orange, purple, like the orange plus purple.
Purple's not as bad for me.
Combination.
I don't mind purple. It's the orange that really puts it off for me. Though
Okay.
it is a interesting color combination.
It is an interesting color combination.
I can't think of any other team in the country, but Sam Houston State maybe. No,
I thought they were like red.
Maybe they are red.
Yeah, the Bearcats with a K.
Bearcats with a K.
Yeah, you know, I have an interesting perspective on it. I grew up in Anderson, right? So growing up in Anderson, we are obviously very close to Clemson.
Sure.
I mean, the main kind of one of the bigger stretches where the Anderson Mall is. You know, we used to go out because I live kind of in the country. It was Clemson, Georgia, and mostly Clemson, right? Like that's mostly what I heard. And I grew up actually not really, which is weird given what I do now. Didn't really watch a lot of college sports, really. I mean, I was NFL, NBA. And so my perspective got different when I got to college, later in high school, and then when I got to college is when I really got into college sports. So it's just been kind of interesting for me for that standpoint. A lot of people say, well, did you grow up, rooting for Carolina? Did you grow up rooting for Clemson? It's like, actually, neither really, just kind of, which is weird, but that's how it happened. But I think, obviously grew up around the rivalry and, have seen whether it was then or now, from then until now, there have been a lot of ups for South Carolina, a lot of downs for South Carolina, streaks for both teams.
Yeah.
That have been painful for the ones on the losing side. I think, there's a lot for Gamecock fans to latch onto, right? I mean, if you grow up, plenty of people grow up and you're one or the other, right, in this state. That's most people, and a lot of people take that very seriously. So, the color orange, the difference in the two schools, right?
Yep.
Because, there's a lot of differences, just the geography and a little bit more city versus a lot more country. Certainly, the coaches that have been at those schools, right? Like Clemson fans love to hate Spurrier. South Carolina fans love to hate Tommy Bowden. Really, really loved to hate Dabo Swinney with his rant that he had back in the day and all those things. So there's a lot there. I think there's no shortage of things you can latch on to.
So given the fact you did not grow up ingrained in the rivalry, picking a side, what was your outsider thought on it when you saw people, I guess, engaging with it before you really kind of fully understood what it was?
Yeah, I just remember a lot of talk around the lunch table, about growing up about the rivalry, and of course I watched and things like that. But it was just you very quickly come to understand it. I didn't grow up. I would imagine that a good portion of people that listen to us here, including the Clemson fans, like they grew up going to the games, and that really wasn't me.
Yeah.
So it was just a little bit of a different perspective.
When we look at this matchup this year, it really seems like it's going to be the highest stakes this matchup's had for both sides, really in about a decade. Last time, or when they played in 2013, the end of the streak for Carolina, that was a number 10 South Carolina team taking down a number 6 Clemson team. Now, that was a Clemson team that still went on to play, I believe, in the Orange Bowl that year. And because of the way BCS was, Carolina was not able to get into a BCS Bowl, unfortunately. But those two teams were towards the top of college football at that point in time. We'll see what the rankings are going to be tonight, but this is very realistically probably going to be a top 15 matchup with both teams. Not the most likely to make the playoff, but still with aspirations nonetheless.
Well, and we'll see how Shane Beamer, like how far he chooses to go with that when he speaks later today. Dabo Swinney's about to talking about an hour, I think, at his Tuesday press conference, but he's already been on record saying, hey, I think this is going to be a top 15 matchup. He's not hiding from the fact that there's national, and he's mentioned the word playoff, implications, because, for Clemson, it's even a little bit more to the extreme for them because they have an opportunity still. They need help.
Yes.
But they're still in the mix for their conference title game. They need Syracuse to beat Miami.
Right.
And they would need to beat South Carolina. So they need to win this game and get help. For South Carolina, you are not in the position where you're going to make the SEC title game, obviously. That's, over and done with. That part of it, we already have clarity there. But if you win this game, you do keep yourself at 9-3, or you earn, a 9-3 record, and then, see what happens from there. So for both teams, you got to have it to stay, alive. Now Clemson, obviously they have the chance to get an automatic qualifier, so a little bit different for them. But nonetheless, this is a game, couple different, motivations there in terms of playoff implications. But for Clemson, they want to come out and win this game just because it's a rivalry game, and then see what happens on the ACC end.
And I thought Bill brought up a really good, interesting point earlier on this morning when going back to that 2013 game where, again, Carolina was able to beat Clemson as the number 10 team, taking down number 6 Clemson. But he said coming away from that game, it really felt like things were starting to switch because that was, again, the end of the 5-game winning streak for Carolina. But it felt like Clemson played better in that game. Turnovers ended up killing them, and that's why they ended up losing. But obviously, they went on the run after that of winning the game against Carolina, and obviously national championships and playoffs and ACC championships and all that kind of stuff. It felt like things were starting to turn back in the favor of Clemson, even with that loss back in 2013, and then jump back to what's happened the past couple of years. Obviously, South Carolina picked up the win in 2022, and then last year, they didn't allow an offensive touchdown for Clemson. They gave up that touchdown the first play of the game where the ball was fumbled with, Rattler trying to get the ball out to Leggett. So, yeah, Clemson won, but it wasn't like a thorough dominating victory like they've had in years past. It does feel like the tide is maybe starting to kind of turn back in Carolina's direction. When you look at the matchup this weekend, very evenly matched in a lot of ways, but I think a lot of people are leaning towards South Carolina being the favored team here. Yeah,
it is definitely turned in terms of the perception of the game, right? So there was a stretch and it was really when Clemson was really rolling, right? This is a team that won a couple national titles under Dabo Swinney. What was that, 16 and 18, and had a chance to play for another couple times. And during that stretch, you kind of went into the game going, this is going to be very, very difficult for South Carolina to win this game. There were times under Steve Spurrier during the streak where you went into the game saying, yeah, I feel like South Carolina is probably the favorite here. And I don't remember what the Vegas lines were back then. Right now, the Vegas line favors Clemson, actually, on this game. So if Carolina goes up there and wins, it's interesting that it would be an upset technically, but just in terms of the perception, I mean, if you go look on social media, I don't know if Clemson fans are favoring Clemson. Carolina fans that I talked to seem to be favoring Carolina almost maybe a little bit too much. And then, kind of the national and regional prognosticators, they seem to favor South Carolina too. And so I think there's a few reasons for that. Number one, in a sense, South Carolina, not that those teams during the most recent Clemson win streak, leading up to the 2022 game, I mean, they had talent, right? But there was a disparity. Now that's much more even. And in certain matchups, you might even feel better about South Carolina's chances on some of the individual matchups or the group matchups.
And I know Clemson's got a better record with only 2 losses on the season, but I think it goes without saying. I think Carolina's impressed a whole lot more, specifically as of late. They are on a 5-game winning streak, obviously, and in that winning streak, you've beaten a currently top 15. They'll probably drop tonight in the rankings, but a top 15 team in Texas A&M. You've beaten a ranked Missouri team. Like, you've picked up impressive wins over some of the better competition you've played, and including playing tight against teams like Alabama and LSU earlier on in the season, despite the fact that you lost those games. When it comes to Clemson, in their biggest games against Louisville and against Georgia, they've gotten beaten pretty thoroughly. The best team that they've gotten a win against was Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago, a team that's now tumbled outside the top 25 rankings, and it took Kate Klubnik going on a 50-yard run at the very end of the game to end up sealing that win for Clemson, obviously. So from just an eye test standpoint, Carolina's definitely been the more impressive team this year, it seems like.
Well, the resume, is better. I think you feel like this Carolina team is more battle-tested, in terms of just the teams they played. Now, how much does that weigh in? I mean, for me, when we're thinking about the game, all we can do right now is talk about it, analyze it, try to predict it by the time Friday rolls around. And, I do think that matters for something. I think that counts for something. And I'm not, obviously the SEC is a better conference than the ACC. I don't know, right into the Firehouse Subs text line if you disagree, give us some evidence. But I think most people recognize that and understand that. And so South Carolina, just from a week-in, week-out basis, they have tougher tests. And so I think if you're looking at some of the matchups here, like let's take one that most people are talking about. Clemson's offensive line, which has been very beat up on the left side, could get a couple of those guys back. Tristan Lee, Marcus Tate, their left tackle, their left guard. Sounds like they've been trending in the right direction to get those guys back. How much will that help? We'll see. If they do play, how healthy are they? How much does that help? But the Carolina defensive line versus the Clemson offensive line. And Clemson's had some O-line issues, particularly when they've been so beat up. Carolina has wreaked havoc most of the season, all season, and they've played some good offensive lines, right? So if you're a Clemson person, you're sitting there going, are we going to be able to block that defensive line, right? If you're Carolina, the Clemson defensive line has had some issues in the run game. And, I mean, look at the defensive lines you've played if you're South Carolina. A&M, Alabama. I mean, on and on, I mean, just Ole Miss. And that game didn't go well. But, like, you've seen this before.
Sure.
There have been some years where you go in to play Clemson, and that might be the best defense you played. That's not the even in the SEC, right? Like, Clemson had some elite defenses under Brent Venables. This year, that's not as much the case. So I do think if you kind of look at the trajectories of the two teams, if you look at the competition, that's one reason why there is some confidence on the South Carolina side. But you got to go out and play the game.
You do, and again, we'll break this down as the entire week goes along. Dabo Swinney's set to talk in about 45 minutes, and he's set to address something pretty significant for the future of not only Clemson football, but the entire state of college sports. With that coming up next, it is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Schooling and Heating. Tyler and Chris along with you on your Tuesday here on The Game.
All right, the presenting sponsor, as always, of the Gamecock Club Hour here on The Game, our friends over at Krantz Cooling and Heating, locally owned and operated, family-owned and operated HVAC business right here in the Midlands. KrantzCooling.com. That's KrantzKooling.com, KrantzCooling.com, or give them a call, 803-672-3224 since 1983. The team over at Krantz Cooling and Heating has been helping families and businesses right here in the Midlands with any HVAC needs, heating repair, maintenance, installation, ductless mini split units. They can also check out your indoor air quality, and they do commercial HVAC, Lexington, Richland counties, all around the Midlands. Again, KrantzCooling.com. They can take care of anything that you may need. Shout out to Justin Krantz, General Manager there at Krantz Cooling and Heating, 803-672-3224.
Well, welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. It's all right, Chris Clark along with you on your Tuesday here on the game. Reminder, Loyal Lisa Special Teams Contest rolls over to another week. $1,200 up for grabs on Saturday if the Gamecocks can get a special teams score against Clemson. Go online to 1075thegame.com and register if you've not already for the Loyal Lisa Special Teams Contest. Some pretty significant news coming out of the upstate. Earlier on this morning, set to be confirmed a little bit later on today with Dabo Swinney's press conference. But as we get set to enter what we anticipate is the new world of college sports and revenue sharing, this according to Larry Williams of Tiger Illustrated earlier on this morning, seems like Clemson really pushing to be at the forefront of making sure they kind of have all their ducks in the row to be successful in this new era.
heading into this game, interesting timing on this too, but I think this thing has been boiling over in the upstate from an NIL standpoint. We were talking last segment, Tyler, about Clemson. There are a lot of reasons that they had so much success from, 2016 to, whatever that was, 2019, and 4 playoffs, 2 national titles. A big reason was they had great players. I mean, really, loaded, Everybody talks about the generational quarterbacks with Watson and Lawrence. That's true. But, man, they had dudes.
Great wide receivers. They were putting guys.
Defensive line.
The defensive line in the NFL every single year.
Yeah.
They were an NFL factory of talent, which they still do that, but
guys.
not at the clip that they were doing it.
There is a drop-off. And so one of the things that you can take note of, and certainly Clemson fans have, is once the kind of calendar flips, so to speak, 2021 NIL arrives, things kind of changed. And so, there are more than one reason for that. There is more than one reason for that. But if you look at Clemson's recruiting, there have been some very high-profile losses, defections, flips, and it's not hard to trace those things back to NIL, right? And so we kind of know Dabo Swinney's philosophy on the portal.
Yep.
It's been another part of this, and NIL, and the fans are wondering, are we properly utilizing NIL? Like, we're Clemson, we have resources. And so, Tyler, even since this morning, since Larry Williams, who I think we'll have on later this week to talk Clemson, Graham Neff, their AD, has put out a letter. He's released a letter to the IPTE members, their booster club, and kind of lays out some of the things that they're doing. And one of the things is they've got a anonymous $3 million donation for NIL. They're going to start giving priority points to donors for NIL-related donations. They're creating an in-house agency, which we saw, South Carolina did that very early, and also, talking about revenue sharing. And so here's the thing, and South Carolina fans might see this and go, well, are we doing any of that? And the good news is, while you might not have seen as much publicly released in statements, Carolina has, and I've been on record, Tyler, after you're just playing the clip of the 2022 Clemson game, I think for some time Carolina was still behind from the NIL standpoint, but it has gotten a lot better in Columbia in the last, several months. And I think there are a lot of people to credit for that. Lots of people to credit for that. And so we know South Carolina has a state law that I won't say new because it's not new anymore. But South Carolina has been very smart in how they've been able to leverage that, right, for to use it to their advantage. So this sounds cool, and all this will probably help Clemson. I'm sure this is being very well received in the upstate.
Sure.
But if you're a South Carolina fan wondering, well, what are we doing? Carolina has gotten so much better in the last year or so, the last several months, and I think they're set up quite well right now. And I think they're set up quite well going into revenue sharing, which is supposed to hit next year. But another piece of this, Tyler, that I will say, collectives are still very important.
Yes.
And Graham Neff talks here, the Clemson AD, about revenue sharing. He talks about adding more scholarships, 150 actually across all sports. Carolina's in a good position from a revenue sharing standpoint, I think, and hey, maybe they'll even make some tweaks there. But collectives like Garnet Trust, that's the one here at South Carolina.
Make sure South Carolina's in a good position with that. In the upstate, Dabo Swinney, again, very resistant to the transfer portal. And it's not that he's been anti-NIL, but he's not pushed for it in the way a lot of other coaches have pushed. And Larry Williams' article here on Tiger Illustrated says they anticipate, especially now that Graham Neff's put out his letter, that when Dabo speaks to the media later on today, there's going to be a part of that where he's addressing this and, giving his thoughts to push this forward. Because, again, I'm sure they had, a sit down with him like, hey, this is where it's going. if you want to be successful, here's what you got to do. Because again, you can see it's not a steep decline, but the decline nonetheless of how this program's been since NIL became a thing. They've not been on the same level as the Georgias and the Ohio States and the Alabamas. And it's like, hey, here's a chance for us to kind of get on this even playing field. We need to take advantage.
Well, that's my question with all this is, it's good to have money. You got to have money nowadays. How do you deploy it from an NIL standpoint? Does Dabo change his stance on the portal? And I think you put it well, Tyler. I wouldn't say he's completely anti-portal, but, the actions kind of look like that, right? Because when you have holes on the roster, which they do, everybody does, to some extent, some greater than others, you now have an easy way to go in and address that. And Dabo always said, we like the guys on our team more than the guys in the portal. It's like, well,
nobody in the portal can play at Clemson. Remember, nobody's
right.
good enough.
Nobody's good enough. Kyle Kennard cannot play at Clemson.
He cannot.
Clearly.
Nope.
Right. So, is there a philosophical change? Another part. I mean, if yes, you have NIL money. The approach Clemson's taken so far is we want to spread it more evenly among our entire team, et cetera. We're not going to, but you kind of have to strike that balance in recruiting now. Players do have more power, and so coaches are constantly. Do you kind of capitulate to what kids want? Do you not? And you have certain guys you might have to, certain guys you don't. And so that's why roster management is tough. So my biggest question is, how do they utilize this? Because it's, you always kind of figured eventually Clemson would figure this out as far as finding more money, but how do they deploy it is my question.
Fairness across the board sounds good to the guys in the room that know they can't make as much as the quarterback or star receiver or whatever it may be, but those guys that do have the higher earning potential, they don't want to just make what everybody else is making. They want to be able to go out there and make more if it certainly warrants that. And again, if Clemson's not able to promise you that, you're going to have a tough time landing some of these bigger recruits.
Well, think about it this way. I'm glad you brought that up. You got 85 guys on scholarship. We know that the SEC, at least, so this is a SEC South Carolina example, we know that they, are going to have 85 guys on scholarship still. If you gave 85 guys on your team $100,000, that's $8.5 million.
Yep.
And you're already, that's, a lot of teams are going to have almost double that.
Sure.
With what they use. But you spend that money very quickly, especially if you're evening it out. But so it's hard. Yeah, it's very hard.
It is. And again, new era set to be upon us. And again, we'll hear what Dabo Swinney has to say about that. And maybe Beamer will get asked about that coming up a little bit later on today as well. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz School and Heating. We'll talk to John Bryce, football scoop, coming up next here on The Game.
Our friends over at Integrated Media can help take your home to the next level. You hear me talk about them all the time, how Michael and Nathan have been out to my home. They've been out to my colleagues Wes Mitchell's home. They can come out to your home as well. Great time to go get a new television, to get a home theater set up. Make sure your internet is properly set up in your home. You might have some new devices, right? Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Christmas holidays. You might be looking to level things up in your home, and they can help you with all of that, whether it's your living room, your bedroom, your home theater, outdoor kitchen, patio setup, whatever you may need. If you want some cool devices, if you want a TV set up, you want a TV mounted on your fireplace, they can do all of that stuff for you. Complete smart home systems as well, where you can control everything, lights, devices, thermostats, security, and cameras from the touch of a button. IntegratedMediaInc.com. Check out their social media, Integrated Media Columbia on Facebook and Instagram, or 948-8327.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler and Chris along with you on your Tuesday here on the game, getting set for rivalry weekend. Carolina and Clemson squaring off on Saturday at noon. And, this past weekend was very chaotic to say the least, and in a lot of ways helped out South Carolina for sure. Now head out to Love Chevrolet phone lines. Welcoming our guy John Bryce once again from footballscoop.com. John, it's been a chaotic season. I don't think anybody saw the chaos coming from this past Saturday. Anything on the docket this weekend that you think could really turn the tables over?
Absolutely. When we visited last week and we talked about potential scenarios that would help South Carolina climb up some more in tonight's rankings, we said, that the Gamecocks needed chaos. They got chaos last weekend. I think Tennessee's got a very, very tough contest at Vanderbilt this weekend. There's some other games out there that could certainly generate chaos. Georgia Tech, I don't think can impact South Carolina too terribly much because Georgia has already clinched a spot in the SEC championship game, so it still has a path to an automatic bid. But this past weekend was almost an entirely best-case scenario for the Gamecocks.
John, appreciate you making time, man. It's Chris. All right, so this just happened, or this is happening as we speak here. I don't know if you timed it this way because you knew Matt Brown is out at North Carolina.
Yeah.
Initial thoughts, number one, and then secondly, it's probably way too early, but you're the man with the plan. Any early thoughts on how desirable this job will be and anyone that makes sense?
Yeah, we, again, our visit last Tuesday, I guess it was, or Wednesday, I don't remember which day, we said then that, I said then I fully expected that job to be coming open. We'd written about it last Monday on Football Scoop and our intel piece, what we're hearing. I think it's an incredibly attractive job. They've shown they can get NIL right, obviously on the basketball side of things, but it's been improved on the football side of things according to some staff there. And I think you'll hear a name like a Matt Campbell from Iowa State be linked to that job. I would be very stunned if not. I think Jamie Chadwell would have interest in that job, but I'm not sure that his Liberty team has done enough this year for him to be able to make the leap like that right now. But it's going to be, as it stands right now, it will be head and shoulders the most attractive job in this cycle. There's still a couple of Power Four dominoes that may yet fall, and that may not even be the only one in the ACC, depending on how this weekend's action shakes out.
John, I think it's become a fun drinking game to take a shot every time Matt Campbell gets brought up as a name for another Power Four job, and if he's ever going to leave Iowa State.
Yeah, it's, he and people close to him have wondered why he has frankly stayed that long. I think you give him credit for the loyalty and the obligation that he's felt to a lot of those kids and the community and the program. But I think everybody has a shelf life everywhere. And, you look at Mark Stoops, he's probably stayed a couple of years too long at Kentucky. And I think that Matt Campbell is cognizant of the fact he could be in that same boat sooner rather than later.
Getting back to the SEC, and again, talking to John Bryce at footballscoop.com, one of the big chaos moments of the weekend was Ole Miss going down to the Swamp and losing to Florida 24-17. And look, we've talked the entire offseason and through most of this year saying this is an Ole Miss team that embraced the portal, embraced NIL, and bought one of the most talented rosters in all of college football. There's no reason to think that this team should not, at minimum, be in the college football playoffs. And aside from another crazy weekend of chaos, does not seem like that's going to be happening, and they're likely to end up in the Citrus Bowl or something along those lines. I can't think of any other word to describe this year than an utter failure for coming up short.
Yeah, extreme disappointment. I mean, you see Lane Kiffin notch by far the biggest win of his career 2 weeks ago, 16 days ago against Georgia, then get a bye date and then follow it up with a really disastrous performance at Florida. Now, that Florida team's a lot better than it was in the first month of the season. And hindsight always being 2020, you wonder if they shouldn't have gone to DJ Lagway full-time even before Mertz was injured. I've looked at the situation at Florida and Auburn somewhat similarly in that they stuck with veteran, older, former Big Ten quarterbacks too long, in my opinion. But yeah, an extreme disappointment in Oxford, and you wonder what it does for Lane moving forward. He's incredibly competitive, and so I know that he will push himself and everyone around him to close strongly as much as they can on the recruiting trail. They will, again, be incredibly active in the portal. But there's no way Ole Miss will be as talented next year as it is this year. Now, maybe they will be a more cohesive team or a more consistent team. The Florida loss, to me, is not a bad loss. The loss at home to Kentucky continues to resonate with me as just an absolute.
About the Notre Dame program, and they're a team that right now is safely in the 12-team field for the college football playoff. They have I would classify it as a bad loss to NIU. Not sure your thoughts, but they have a game this week against Southern Cal, who is not a great team this year. They've lost a lot of close games, Southern Cal has. Thoughts on what it would do for Notre Dame's chances if they were to drop that game? Seems like if they win it, they're safely in. But if they dropped it, what does that mean?
Yeah, if they lose this weekend, I don't think Notre Dame makes the field. If Notre Dame loses this weekend, then I think the absolute best case scenario for the Irish would be as to sneak in as the number 11 seed, and it would require a bunch of chaos. So, again, the teams that are out there on the fringe, and, again, I think South Carolina will move up several spots tonight, and I was doing some research, and I'm sure you guys already know this if not already talked about it on the air this morning, but South Carolina is getting ready to play its fifth game this week against the team in the current CFP top 25, and the Gamecocks are 2-2. If they go 3-2 against CFP top 25 teams, South Carolina is going to have, I think, probably the best resume of a 3-loss team out there. I know that Ole Miss is going to be sitting there with 3 losses, having beat South Carolina, and I know that Alabama could be sitting there with 3 losses and also having beaten South Carolina. But I still think a very quality win against one of the 3 highest-rated ACC teams and on the road would put South Carolina in a very viable position going into the final week of the season. No, if Notre Dame loses this weekend to USC, it makes its 9-game winning streak for naught. It brings back up the really bad loss to NIU and an inexcusable loss to NIU, and I think almost certainly would knock Notre Dame completely out of the picture.
Again, we're talking to John Bryce, footballscoop.com. Last one for you here. Got a little over a minute. Big question coming away from the weekend is what happens to Indiana. I think it was easy for a lot of people to say, we'll drop them outside the top 10, and then Ole Miss and Alabama proceeded to lose later on that day. So when the committee's rankings coming out tonight, does Indiana still have a chance, or are they on the outside looking in?
Yeah, guys, we broke this down on the Football Scoop podcast yesterday, and I really think going into this weekend's games or tonight's rankings, either one, that you're looking at still 4 Big Ten teams, 3 SEC teams. I think the ACC was the beneficiary of last weekend. I think that it's positioned as long as SMU and Miami don't lose until they meet each other in the championship game. They may both get in, and then 1 apiece from the Big 12 and a group of 5, and then Notre Dame. That's how I see the field right now. That would be the 12 teams, and I expect that tonight's playoff rankings will probably reflect very similarly.
He is John Bryce from footballscoop.com. We'll be checking with you, I'm sure, down the line as we finally figure out who's going to be in this 12-team playoff and whatever chaos can unfold between now and then. Appreciate it as always, John.
No, I appreciate you guys. Have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy the time with your families.
You too, certainly so. Appreciate that. We'll come back, wrap up hour number 2 of the Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Get back into this Mac Brown thing because it's an interesting conversation about how we got to this point. And again, where's UNC going to be looking at going forward? That's coming up next. Gamecock Club Hour presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating here on The Game.
All right, let me tell you about our friends over at Classic Roofing. ClassicRoofingSC.com, Joe Reeder, Max Sawyer. Families that live right here in the Midlands and years of experience. GAF certified roofers as well. Only about 7% of roofers nationwide carry that certification. They can help you with all of your roofing needs anywhere in the Midlands. Roof inspections, roof installations, roof replacements, roof repairs. If you're looking for a new roof, you can design your new roof online with the GAF virtual design tool. Again, go to classicroofingsc.com to learn more about that. Or you can give Joe and Mac a call, 803-590-7870. They do free estimates. They do residential. They do commercial. Locally owned company right here in the Midlands of families, again, that live right here in the Midlands. Customer satisfaction guaranteed with Joe Reeder and Max Sawyer over at Classic Roofing. ClassicRoofingSC.com.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Club Hour, presented by Krantz Cooling and Heating. Tyler and Chris along with you on your Tuesday here on the game. Reminder today, post-game show live from Cato's Power Equipment, 4012 Beltline Boulevard from 3 until 6. You can stop by and register to win tickets to see Carolina Clemson football, Carolina Clemson men's basketball, and Carolina Clemson baseball. Get tickets to all three of those. Come by and register for your chance to win. Winner will be announced Friday morning at 7:30 on the early game with Bill and Preston. We mentioned it a moment ago with John Bryce Football Scoop as the story was literally breaking right before we came back for that segment. But Mack Brown has been fired by the University of North Carolina. This is being confirmed by multiple outlets around the country. This is something that it's been so weird this year, right? Because you go back to the James Madison game where he allegedly got up in front of the entire locker room and said, do y'all even want me here? Do I need to still be coaching here? Essentially saying, should I quit? Team, no, don't quit. But it seemed like he was on his way out. Then a couple of weeks ago, really a couple of days ago, we get the confirmation, no, he's actually coming back next year. And now this morning we get them saying, actually, no, we're firing the guy with one game left to go in the regular season. It's just so topsy-turvy. I think this is ultimately the right decision to make for the future of North Carolina football. It's just weird how we've gotten here.
It is weird, and isn't this kind of the same thing Mac did at Texas?
A little bit, like overstaying your welcome, maybe?
Yeah. Where, you're going to make them say, Mac, you got to go. It's time.
Sure.
And weird ending because, he said, that James Madison game was awful, right? He gave up 1 million points, and then apparently he said something in the locker room like, I'm thinking about not coming back. I'm not coming back. Should I come back? Whatever it was. There have been kind of different opinions. Kind of said it spur of the moment, it seemed like, and then that caused problems, right? So I think and then went from there to I'm not leaving to I'm digging in. I'm definitely coming back to actually no, you're not, right? So just some kind of disconnect there. I do think, and you brought this up the other day, once it gets out there that something is said that plants the seed of I might not be here very long, It's the Steve Spurrier 2 to 3 years thing. It hurts.
Yep.
Especially when you've got a coach, like you've already got a coach who's old. What is he, 73?
73.
He's an older guy.
Yep.
He's clearly not going to be around. Well, I say that. It's highly unlikely he's going to be around 10 years.
Coaching.
Yeah. Yes. Come on, Sal.
We gotta phrase that the right way.
He's probably not going to be coaching for 10 more years. But then, so like that's common sense.
Yeah.
But then when somebody who is of that age says, I don't know. I don't even know if I'm going to be back. Then it's like, all right. I mean, blood's in the water.
Yeah,
you know?
Toothpaste out of the tube at that point in time. It's going to be hard to reel that back in. Again, it's just, look, I think bringing him in when they did in 2019 was a good decision because, again, that program was at the bottom of the ACC, and Larry Fedora, left it in shambles. So bringing back a guy that had already been there before, understood the lay of the land, and also obviously had success at Texas, to get it back on its feet was smart. When they decided to extend him, I think it was right around this time last year through, I believe, 2027, that's where I was like, okay, that I don't understand because, again, what they peaked in 2022 with a 9-5 season. They've been going to bowl games, but they've not been in that upper echelon in the ACC. And I'm like, I don't know if you want to extend this any longer instead of going out there and saying, hey, let's find our next coach that is going to potentially be here for 15 to 20 years and start building on that as opposed to kind of treading water with Mac Brown the next couple of years.
I just think, extensions for me, they're I don't want to say they're not a big deal. Like if I find out if I find out tomorrow that Shane Beamer's going to get a contract extension, I'm going to be all over trying to report it and and all that, and we're going to talk about it. But these days, man, like in most cases you're either getting an extension or getting fired.
Pretty much.
And coaches are kind of stuck. You have the weird situation with Charles Huff at Marshall where he's on the last year of a deal doing well, but it's just like this weird standoff, like what's going to happen here. But most of the time it's the case. Extended or fired. Like those are your options. If you're doing well enough to stay, you're going to have an agent pushing for an extension. Hey, I need an extension for recruiting. And they're going to feel like they have to give it to you. Or you're going to get fired. There's going to be a year or two in there where maybe you're working on the contract that you have. For the most part, every couple years, you're probably going to reset that. And I think for UNC, you probably feel stuck. I mean, Mac Brown's your guy that he's been there twice. This is the second stint. He's won more games than any other coach at UNC. You don't want to run him off, right? And so if he's doing pretty well, you extend him, even if you're sitting there in the back of your mind, this isn't going to last long.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird dynamic, and we'll see what direction UNC ultimately decides to go. John Bryce brought up, Matt Campbell is one of those names that gets brought up every time a major job opening happens. But it's definitely one of those weird things, seeing how all this went down this year, and them ultimately getting this decision. They still got one more game to go, playing NC State this weekend. They will be going to a bowl game. I don't know, have they named an interim head coach yet?
I did not see, although former UNC player Ryan Switzer's the interim head coach at Tulsa.
That is right.
Maybe they could hire him.
Which I was
for
like,
the season.
Gosh,
how about that?
That was,
yeah.
I feel like he was just playing at UNC yesterday.
He really was. It will be fascinating to see the candidate pool for this job. It's a pretty good job now. And credit to Mac Brown, he made it into a better job than what it was when he took it. You know who I would target if I were UNC?
Who's that?
John Sumrall from Tulane.
Okay.
32-6 as a head coach so far. Good young coach.
Yeah.
That I think he might come up. I have a feeling.
Keep an eye on it. Again, news coming out about half an hour ago, Mac Brown being fired by the University of North Carolina. Get back into previewing Clemson coming up next. The Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
All right, let me tell you once again about our friends over at Krantz Cooling and Heating. Thankful to those guys for always being our presenting sponsor of the Gamecock Club Hour here on The Game. Justin Krantz, general manager of Krantz Cooling and Heating. Great guy. See him a lot. They do so much out in the community in the Midlands. If you're at events out in the Midlands, chances are You've seen Krantz and their support of the local community, and they've been doing that since 1983. Family-owned and operated business at Krantz Cooling and Heating. They can help you with all of your residential and commercial HVAC needs. I don't know about y'all. The heat has been on for several days in the month of November at the Clark household. If you've got any problems with your home's heating unit, have them check it out. They can do installations. They can do repairs. They can help you with any problems that you may have. They can even put you on the Krantz Club, what helps you with preventative maintenance. That's KrantzCooling.com. Go there to learn more about all their services at Krantz Cooling.
Yeah. 11 o'clock on your Tuesday morning. Welcome in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris along with you. Shout out to Jeannie for the wonderful decorations in our studio here. as we are truly in the holiday spirit. You can't see them all on camera, but we got tinsel, we got Christmas trees, we got presents, lights. It's a holiday party in here already.
We're ready. We're prepared. Lots of smiles. Is it hat day today? We're all wearing hats.
I wear hats every day. You guys are getting with the program.
Wes, is that hat from Gold Line Framing?
It is indeed.
That's a nice hat.
Yeah, I copied Tyler.
Should have told me. I would have worn mine.
I thought about wearing mine.
And then
so we would.
Chris, do you have the white one?
Nah.
No. We'll
Mine's
get a
the
guy in
garnet.
all 3 colors.
Yeah, I do need to get the white one though. Those things are nice. Check them out. Yeah, it is hat day though.
Which one do you have?
The garnet one.
He's got the garnet.
The full.
See, we get advertised all 3.
Yeah.
There you go. What are we doing today, y'all?
We're talking about how much we hate Clemson. I brought up a little bit earlier that my hate starts with the fact they wear the color orange. You give me any team in orange, I'm automatically going to hate them. I grew up that way and I'll always be that way. So the rivalries for me starts there. And there's plenty of other reasons to dislike Clemson, but wearing orange, that's number one for me.
I already gave my reasons, Wes. Or I talked about it last hour a little bit. Yeah, I had to grow up in Anderson. That's Clemson, Georgia territory. Tyler's people. What about the great city of York?
Yeah, what was happening in York growing up, Wes?
A lot was happening. I was about to say not much. but
Things are happening.
That's a lie. By the way, people are hammering Jack for not understanding the rivalry.
Yeah, I missed that. I missed that.
On the Gamecock Central message boards, which you should go check out and sign up for. But, I mean, all right, here's why rivalries matter, especially in the South. Sunday lunch, Thanksgiving dinner, or Thanksgiving lunch. Like the holiday, I'm talking holidays, church, Sunday lunch, when you have, or even Monday morning at school. When you go to school, go to church, family get-togethers with half South Carolina, half Clemson. Because most of the state, you do have...
It's a pretty good mix.
Yes, it's a mix. And then you have to hear about it. That is why rivalries matter. And that's why this is one of the most, I would say, nationally underrated rivalries that exist, because it is such a just fierce rivalry within the state, and you have no pro teams as like common ground. Yeah, some people claim the Panthers. I'll claim the Panthers, but
it's not as fun right now.
It's not quite the same.
Hey, they did almost beat the Chiefs.
But I'm saying they don't play games in South Carolina either.
No,
so
they
even when
don't.
things are going well.
Yeah.
What little connection they have to the state of South Carolina is pretty much evaporated at this point. They're the North Carolina Panthers, for being completely
Charlotte
honest.
Panthers.
But you're right. Again, this is an ingrained rivalry that, even as somebody that didn't grow up in the state was very well aware of what went on in the Palmetto State with these two teams and how personal of a rivalry it was. And I brought this up to Chris a little bit earlier. When you look at the past decade, obviously Clemson went on the long winning streak after Carolina had their 5 in a row. They ended in 2013. But in the past 2 years, Carolina won on the road 2 years ago, and then last year didn't allow an offensive touchdown, gave up the score on pretty much the opening play of the fumble that they were able to scoop up. And, it was a back and forth, low scoring affair the entire game. It feels like we're kind of on the cusp of the momentum shifting back in South Carolina's favor, hopefully for the next handful of years, with what we have going in this matchup, where we anticipate both teams going to be in the top 15. We'll get to rankings coming up here in just a little bit, but it truly feels like a lot of people look at Carolina as maybe the favorite going into this game, even though it is on the road in Clemson.
Well, and even though Vegas does not see it that way.
Like, what, 2.5 points? I mean, that's the home nod you get.
Yeah, but that counts. That matters.
It does, but
it's an upset if Carolina wins, technically.
Yeah, technically speaking.
I mean, I'm a little surprised that Vegas sees it that way, to be completely frank, but they have their reasons, and, as we talked about with A&M and Auburn, like, Vegas knows. So I don't think this is a cakewalk for either team. You're going to have to go play well. Obviously, if you're Carolina, you got to clean up some of what we saw this past week. And you got to just play a cleaner brand of football, I think. But certainly, when you look at where this game is, there is a great deal of confidence, I would say, from Gamecock fans that has built up over the last probably month or so. And a lot of that is the emergence of Sellers and him playing better and better as the season has progressed, getting the running game going some, just overall getting the offense going to where for a while this is a team where we really counted on the defense and we knew the defense was probably going to play well, but the offense, was a little bit more up and down or just down there at the beginning, and they've just gradually gotten better. So I think a lot of confidence from South Carolina fans in this game, and not as much confidence that I've seen coming from Clemson fans, but you do still have to go play the game. You have to go execute. You have to do what you're supposed to do. And, I think it's truly not going to be easy, even as confident as I think South Carolina fans are right now.
Yeah, I have been I told Tyler this last hour. I'm not obviously as ingrained in what the Clemson fan base thinks as South Carolina, but it seems like South Carolina fans are pretty confident. I've talked to some. I mean, Wes, I was out there hanging out with Gamecock fans before the Wofford game on Saturday and heard some very interesting we're going to clobber Clemson. It's not even going to be close, et cetera. And Clemson fans seem to be very leery of this game. Some seem to be expecting a loss. So the perspective has changed because, but I think both teams have had years during their streaks. It's been kind of a streaky series as of late for the most part, right? Clemson, before that 2022 game, had a long streak going. Before that, South Carolina had a 5-game win streak. And a lot of those years, kind of what you thought happened ended up happening, Like a lot of those years during Clemson's long winning streak, you went into it going, Clemson's favored, and you can see why. And they're clearly the better team going in. Rewind back to some of those Spurrier teams and years, those games you thought would be closer because both teams were pretty darn good at that time. But a lot of the time, you felt like South Carolina was the better team and would win, and they did, right? And so, past couple years, it's been a little bit different. This year, I think because of the way that the season has gone for both these teams, how battle-tested South Carolina is, Clemson not playing as good of a schedule and some of the warts that they have, it seems like the perception's changed. But I'm with you. I do not think it's going to be easy for either team. And I haven't finalized my pick. I have a lean. I don't have a score pick within that structure. But I'm not picking a blowout either way. I can tell you that.
Well, and the stakes for this game for both teams are pretty significant. Now, Clemson does still theoretically have a pathway to the playoff, even if they were to lose South Carolina. If, Miami ends up losing to Syracuse, they could still make the ACC championship game win that way. But for Carolina, this is your last data point. It's your last opportunity to impress the committee, and we'll see where they end up in the playoff rankings tonight. But I'm assuming Clemson's still going to be, if nothing else, one spot ahead of them. So a chance to beat a team that's higher ranked than you, hopefully by a score or two, and to really put that exclamation point on your resume because you're not going to be able to play conference championship weekend to add that 13th data point. And again, probably going to need some chaos happening around you. But again, the stakes high for both teams in terms of playoff aspirations for the first time in the playoff era.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of what you dream of. This is what, if you're a fan of either one of the teams, there are very few things you can agree on. And one of the things you do agree on, though, is wanting this game to have high stakes, I think. And, I think if you're Carolina, like I don't even know if you dreamed of this coming into this season. And so, like a couple years ago, you were going to Death Valley as actually a big underdog. And kind of the thought process was, hey, you can help keep Clemson out of the college football playoff. And that was kind of really the rallying cry is like, hey, end Tennessee's season, end Clemson's season. And that's something good to motivate you and rally around. But really, nobody wants to actually be playing spoiler. You want to be the team that has a shot to get in yourself. And so with the expanded playoff, this opens up these windows of opportunity that just maybe did not exist or definitely did not exist before. So I think it adds an extra layer to this thing. I don't know where this thing's going to stand in the history of the rivalry in terms of importance, but it is definitely up there. And it becomes infinitely more important if either team is able to ride this win to actually getting in. Like if you get the chaos you're looking for, and we obviously playing major opponents and playing in big games, Clemson is the more battle-tested program in terms of just the last decade or so being in playoff games or playoff quality games. Now, does that matter this week? I don't know, because a lot of these guys that are on this Clemson team have maybe not necessarily been in that position.
We'll take a preliminary look at Clemson coming up next as we get set for the Gamecocks and the Tigers coming up on Saturday. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Tuesday on the Game.
All right, guys, as you know, taking good care of your roof, it can be challenging, but you do not have to do it alone. Hit up our friends over at Classic Roofing. You can do that a couple of different ways, 803-590-7870, or just head on over to classicroofingsc.com. If you're a little more old school, you can always email as well, information@classicroofingsc.com. Also works if you go to that website. Again, classicroofingsc.com. You can hit the free estimate button at the top right of your screen and go ahead and have them come out and look at your home or business. Classic Roofing has years of expertise under their hats, and they want to be your go-to residential and commercial roofing company for home and business owners in and around the Columbia, South Carolina area. That could be, of course, an entire roof replacement, or that could be something as simple as coming out, having that free estimate, and getting an idea of how much life you have left on that roof. Again, that phone number, 803-590-7870.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West and Chris along with you here on your Tuesday on the game. It is time to flip the card over and check the stats brought to you by our friends over at Palmetto Cards. Again, we don't know where exactly they'll be ranked until tonight, but you have a Clemson team this weekend sitting at 9-2 on the season, though the 2 losses they had were against the 2 best teams they played in Georgia and Louisville, losing both those games. And fun fact, Clemson only has 1 win over a team that's currently bowl eligible right now, that being their Pittsburgh win a couple of weeks ago. So it seems like when Clemson plays the toughest competition on their schedule, they typically end up coming up a little bit short.
Well, they also were behind in that game, and Pitt had their backup quarterback.
Yep.
And their starter is pretty good. So I think, yeah, that definitely – there's a reason why – even though Carolina has 1 more loss than Clemson, that they're sitting there right behind each other, right? And we've talked about this for the last 2 weeks. If you're the committee, there's really people. I mean, the chair got asked about it, but there's really not a heck of a lot, much of a point in spending any time. Well, who do we have ahead of who between the 2 schools? Because it's going to be decided on the field right here. In a few days. So I think that there's a lot of arguments in terms of this committee and things they're going to have to fight through. And there is no perfect answer is what they're going to have to deal with, because no matter what the answer is, there's going to be people that have an argument against it. But in terms of South Carolina Clemson, we're going to figure this thing out on the field, not on paper. But certainly on paper, yeah, this is a Clemson team that we all know has just kind of rolled through a very light schedule.
That's what I'm excited about. We are in the point of the season where even though we have a lot of very meaningful college football action, all the games matter right now. They've mattered, and they will continue to do so this week and for conference title games, right? I mean, certainly will matter. But this has been a season here lately where there are a lot of hypothetical games going on. If so-and-so played so-and-so, then so-and-so would win. And, we've done a lot of that comparing Clemson and Carolina's schedules, right? When the college football playoff rankings come out tonight, guys, I think Clemson will probably still be ahead of South Carolina because they were ahead in the last rankings, and both teams won. And both teams won handily against FCS opponents from the state of South Carolina. So they're probably still going to be ahead. What are we going to have? Carolina fans are probably going to say, and look, they may have a case, but they're going to say, well, why is Clemson ahead? You don't need to worry about it. Doesn't matter. Those 2 teams will play. Whichever one wins will then be higher in the college football playoff rankings, and there won't be much argument at that point. So I'm excited about having an opportunity to actually solve one of those hypotheticals.
Now, it is intriguing to know where Carolina is going to find themselves coming up tonight. And Jack and I kind of ran through this because, again, you had so much chaos this weekend. How far does Indiana fall? What happens with Alabama and Ole Miss? And are you in a position where if you do pick up a win over what I'm assuming is a higher-ranked Clemson team this weekend, is that enough, and getting a little help too, to push you in as a 3-loss team? It's an uphill climb, that's for sure, but Carolina is at least in conversation with that, and we certainly expect them to be I'd say no worse than probably 15th. Now, the issue that you run into is the 2 new 3-loss teams in the SEC, Alabama and Ole Miss, are 2 teams that beat you. So, and look, the committee's not been afraid to put teams that lost to other teams ahead of them, even though they had the same record, as Alabama was 4 spots ahead of Tennessee last week, and South Carolina a couple weeks ago was 1 spot ahead of LSU, despite losing to them and having the exact same record. So it's not uncommon. I just don't know how the committee is going to view that tonight. And again, 1 or 2 spot difference is a huge deal for Carolina, who needs every bit of help they can get to try and get it into what is pretty much the top 10 to make the playoff.
Yeah, and how much, let's say you're behind Alabama and Ole Miss, which I expect.
Yes.
We'll see what happens. Let's say Ole Miss and Alabama both win next week, and then South Carolina beats Clemson. Does another win, how important does the committee see that? Does that give you enough to jump one of those teams? Does it give you enough to jump 2 of those teams? Right now, this is On3's just projection of A, the top 25, but B, what the 12-team bracket would look like after tonight with the 25 they projected. And right now, they have South Carolina at 15, moving up 3 spots. They have Clemson at 13, moving up 4 spots and actually jumping Ole Miss. So Ole Miss in between South Carolina and Clemson ahead of the Gamecocks. Well, for the first time, if that holds, and we'll see how the committee sees it. Don't you have a feeling the committee was going to have at least one take tonight where everybody's like, "Wait, what?" Mm-hmm. And so we'll see where that falls. But for the first time, South Carolina now finds itself in the first 4 out category, if this projection were to hold.
Right.
And the 3 teams also in the first 4 out, the 3 teams ahead of South Carolina in the first 4 out, Alabama, Clemson, Ole Miss, and South Carolina. So essentially, if you want to really boil it down, you have to find a way to jump those 3 teams, which one of them will take care of itself by winning the game. Jump those 3 teams, and then jump one more team, and you're in. If this projection, that's a big if this projection were to be right. Guys, I can't help but think if South Carolina wins on Saturday, then the fate of the South Carolina Gamecocks playoff hopes, which is a sentence we didn't think we'd be saying, the fate of the South Carolina Gamecocks playoff hopes comes down to, can you find another loss or 2 among Notre Dame, Indiana, Tennessee, SMU, Alabama, and Ole Miss?
So cheer for Southern Cal, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, Auburn. I don't even know who Purdue. I don't know who SMU has this weekend.
Now, Wes, in that
California,
in that bracket that you have there, how many ACC teams make it? Is it just the one AQ, or did they have Miami and SMU in there?
Miami and SMU.
Okay. Because John Bryce brought that up last hour. He actually is of the mind that the ACC can get 2 in.
Yes. Right now, that's with 2.
Yeah.
So the big factor tonight is, do Georgia and Tennessee jump Miami? Because Miami, if we're just using the rule of moving teams up when teams in front of you lose, Miami could be number 6 or they could be number 8, depending on how they view Georgia and Tennessee. Because if Miami's number 6, they beat Syracuse, make the conference championship game. Very strong argument they still get in, even if they lose to an SMU in the title game. However, if they're like number 8 and you have a 8-9 or 9-10 matchup in the title game, then loser of that could fall out. Which again, if there's one less ACC team, that could help Carolina in this instance.
Yeah, and so if SMU wins this week, but then Miami beats SMU, do we think it's a 1-bid league, or is SMU still in? Because that's where, again, you're having to.
Yeah.
You can, even if you don't jump Alabama and like, you probably have to jump at least one SEC team.
Sure.
Now that would be a Tennessee loss potentially, or I don't know. Does Auburn upset Alabama? Does Ole Miss just quit on the year? Could happen, but point being, you need to move up within this kind of first 4 out, but then you need a couple of teams that are currently in this first 4 out to also be able to slide up because something happens ahead of them, if that makes sense. And then you can, in some ways, the chaos could take some of these decisions out of the committee's hands. If Vanderbilt beats Tennessee, I think they fall behind Carolina.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Glad I'm not on the committee. That's a lot of work to do.
So, I mean, but these things can happen.
They can.
It's very easy on paper to be like, oh, well, that's not going to happen.
Well, look what happened this past weekend.
So, Bill Connolly, SP Plus, ESPN.com, he said, so his stuff basically has Clemson and Carolina as just a coin flip. He said, even if you take that one out of the math, if you plug in all these games that are going to factor into the sort of final 8 or so spots. And even though individually it's like, okay, that would be a huge upset. That would be a huge even though individually it looks not likely. There's only a 35% chance that every favorite will win this weekend. So you have, just by the odds, there's a very good chance at least one of these favorites will fall. So that by the odds, you're probably going to get some help.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, can you win the game, and how does the committee see you, obviously, is going to be the human element, still a big part of this. And do you get a little bit of help, or do you get a lot of help? But to Beamer's point, and the point we have had the entire time, is just win and put the pressure on the committee to make the decision. I have thought the entire time, if South Carolina just wins, typically, not always the case, typically these things just find a way to sort themselves out. If you keep winning, you give yourself a chance, obviously.
Winning cures everything, that's for sure. We'll see what South Carolina does this weekend against Clemson. We'll go back and look at the last time the Gamecocks beat the Tigers 2 years ago up there in Death Valley. Coming up next, Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on The Game.
that's true.
Problem is the appreciation. I used to tell people all the time, they'd say, what's the difference in Clemson? Let me tell you, at some places there's an expectation, but at Clemson there's an appreciation. And what's happened at Clemson is we've won so much that even when it used to be the fun's in the winning, now even when you win, people like you complain and criticize the coaches and question everything. People like you, all right?
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler West, Chris, along with you. That is when somebody called into Dabo's radio show last year, and he went on his famous Tyler from Spartanburg rant. And I bring that up because, he talks about the appreciation for wins compared to where it was when he took over, a decade and a half ago. And we're kind of about to look back at the 2022 win for South Carolina over Clemson, which was the final year of that 12-year stretch of Clemson winning at least 10 games. And obviously they missed out on the playoff. They still won the ACC championship game, and they played in the Orange Bowl and lost to Tennessee that year. But I do think it's significant to put that into context because, again, what Dabo Swinney is talking about there, whether you agree with him or not, is saying that the Clemson fan base has become so spoiled with how much success they had, winning national championships, going to playoffs, all that kind of stuff. An 11-win year and going to a New Year's Six bowl game with an ACC championship game was not good enough for them. And again, as we look back to when the NIL and all that came about a couple years ago, you see a slow regression, not a massive regression, but one where they're not at the mountaintop of college football anymore. And again, they're going into this weekend needing help to get themselves in the college football playoff compared to where they've been in years past, where they're usually a shoe-in as a top 4 team. So interesting dynamic, and I think Carolina's win there 2 years ago was an important point on the frustration of that fan base being to where it is now.
I think when you set the expectation, go back to my college game day index. When the expectation is that you're going to be one of those 10 teams that's talked about and has, kind of a place in the national college football conversation basically all the time, and then that gets slightly taken away, then you don't deal with that very well. And then I don't think that's unique to Clemson. That's going to be anywhere. And look at what Alabama and their fans and how they're reacting right now. They kind of a similar situation. Obviously, that's with a new coach, but even when it feels like, hey, this team is going to be on a run forever. I remember having the conversation with Gamecock fans, and they're going, is Clemson going to just keep this up forever? Because it felt like forever to South Carolina fans. And, I think both Alabama and Clemson, the last couple of years, they've kind of become human. They're almost their logo and sort of the vibe and just the expectation for that program becomes greater than they even are as a team. And so when you add in lack of transfer portal, when you add in NIL sort of spreading the talent around across college football a little bit more, and then perhaps even most importantly, when you take out the fact that you had 2 generational quarterbacks back-to-back, and then, Klubnik is probably actually a better player than I think Carolina fans give him credit for, because Carolina fans remember him struggling and not living up to that hype for the last couple of years. This year, he's actually quietly been very good in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, but when you have generational quarterback play on top of these great recruiting classes, you're gonna have a chance. Throw in the fact that you're not tested every single week in the ACC in terms of competition, and you can see why Clemson got there, but you can see why they were kind of doomed to take a step back if they did not replace those quarterbacks with similar talents, which is nearly impossible to do, honestly, for that long of a stretch.
Yeah, even, short memories, right? You can be a victim of your own success. You know, when Dabo Swinney took over, and he didn't do it immediately. I mean, he almost got fired at Clemson.
Well, Clemsoning was a thing for a while, remember?
Yeah. Well, that'll get him going if you mention that.
Oh, I know it will.
But seriously, like, almost got fired because for Clemson, it was they had lost. They were doing well otherwise, but they lost 5 games in a row to South Carolina, and that was kind of unfathomable, right? And so they stuck with it, and then a few years later, you see what happened, right? So he did that, but now on the other side of that, and it's not like they've gone the direction of now they're winning 4 games a year. You know, they're still having good seasons and success, but because of that standard, which is very hard for anyone to meet, even the big name brand programs aren't going to be in the playoff every year in a 4-team playoff. You know, now it's expanded. It's just, it makes it hard, and people kind of lose that perspective. And even if you don't have that championship kind of pedigree, even if you haven't been winning titles lately, I mean, we saw it here. 1 game, a win, 1 game, barely beat Old Dominion, probably not, probably a 2-win season. It's like, no, you got to, we live in a society that's very much a microwave, and I want it now, and you kind of lose perspective on what's happened in the past and in the past and what's been built. And we have seen this year in college football, never been as much parity as there has been. So this is a year where it's harder than ever, I would say, to win. So they definitely have some things that they've got to get better at. What Tyler and I were going over, Wes, they announced Clemson did some NIL stuff that they're doing this morning because that's been a big, focus for them or a big focus for the fans, I think I would say.
Yeah, and, the fact that, and we'll get some of what Dabo said, coming up tomorrow, the fact that, Dabo Swinney is kind of at the forefront of this and leaning into this and pushing his fan base to get, Clemson to that $20.5 million number that we've heard thrown out there, I think is pretty significant because, again, he's somebody that has been, not as resistant to NIL as he was with the transfer portal seemingly, but not necessarily wanting to parade for it. And it seems like that's changed. And, again, Clemson knowing that, hey, if they want to be successful like they were over those handful of years in the new era of college football, they have to get up to speed with what everybody else is going to be doing. And this seems to be kind of their first step in trying to do that.
Do we think this means the portal is now open for Clemson as well, or do you think there's still pushback on that aspect?
Well, does he think anybody in the portal is good enough to play there? That's the big question.
Well, if he's watched any college ball this year, he would change that.
Well, Kyle Kennard's not good enough to play Clemson because he's out of the portal.
I mean, I know what you're doing, but at some point you have to admit you're wrong on something.
Yeah, I know. I'm giving you the thought process of Dabo Swinney.
But how could that possibly be the thought process at this point?
I don't know.
I could see thinking I was more important, or I was smarter than everybody in the room when this started.
Yep.
But at some point, you got to be able to adjust, right? Now, South Carolina fans should hope that Dabo just wants to continue to be hard-headed.
Yeah, that's what I said. My biggest question was, they're going to have funding. How do you deploy it? What's your strategy? I don't think that Dabo Swinney and Clemson's going to turn into a school where you look at their commitment list and they've got 20 transfers coming in. But will they supplement with the type of players that, frankly, they probably could have been getting out of the portal? Maybe. And, whether or not they do that probably weighs into what the success looks like in the future.
Take a look back at the last time Carolina beat Clemson 2 years ago, actually on this day 2 years ago, when they won 31-30 and knocked Clemson out of the college football playoff. It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on your Tuesday here on the Game.
All right, guys, you know it. This show presented by our friends over at Firehouse Subs. Check out the new to everybody else. You may have tried it last year when we were at Test Market here in Columbia. The new Thanksgiving turkey sub available through the end of November. You're running out of time. It has carved turkey breast slices, dressing, cranberry sauce, and mayo, all served, as you know, hot on a toasted sub roll. Get on over there and try it today. Man, I am hungry, guys. It is almost lunchtime. Hit up firehousesubs.com or do what we do. Hopefully, you've already done this. Get the Firehouse Subs app, make a profile on there, and then you're going to get points every single time you order Firehouse. And then in the future, you can take those points and trade them in for a free sub, whether that's the Thanksgiving turkey sub or one of your other favorites. Also, Hot Sauce Bar is back. So however you want to customize that sandwich and make it your own, you got a lot of great hot sauce options there as well. Hit that Rapid Rescue to Go from Firehouse Subs right now for lunch.
Welcome back in. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris along with you here on the game. We get a double dose of Beamer today. Press conference coming up as always on Tuesday at 1 o'clock. You'll be able to listen to that during the halftime show with myself and Terry Ford. Then tonight, because of the holiday on Thursday, switching things around. Carolina calls at 6 p.m. and we'll get his final thoughts ahead of Saturday's game against Clemson, which again, high stakes for both teams, expect to be ranked inside the top 15. You heard the little sounder there as we were coming back in the final seconds as Carolina picked up the 31-30 victory 2 years ago today up there in Clemson, taking out a then number 8 Tigers team, keeping them out of the college football playoff and putting together what was a incredible 2 weeks in a row with Carolina having beaten Tennessee the prior week and really kind of springboarded Carolina to being one of the talks of the college football offseason between 2022 and 2023. Obviously, that didn't end up resulting in a great year last year, but Carolina back in a very similar type of spot this weekend going into playing Clemson.
Yeah, I feel like just Carolina being able to just break through for that win, and it was a strange game. It was not a necessarily pretty game. It was one of those games where you had to just, if you were Carolina, face adversity, keep fighting, find a way. And, I mean, I remember at halftime, Carolina's down, and I'm thinking, like, they look like the better team, but they've just made too many mistakes at this point. And, you know, I think when a team just kind of has owned you for a stretch, it's never going to be easy to actually break through. Like, I feel like there's a mental hurdle when a team owns you like that. I feel like there was a mental hurdle to South Carolina breaking through and finally beating Missouri a couple of weeks ago as well. Like, it's never going to be easy against those teams, but then once you do, it's, okay, this team's not unbeatable. This program is not unbeatable. You have an opportunity to go step on a field. And, you know, even last year, that did not feel like Clemson was a dominant football team against South Carolina. So I tend to think, guys, that once you break through and win, it does make it just a step easier to win in the future. And now you kind of have a situation where these two programs are on pretty equal footing in terms of just where the teams are at this exact second. I mean, they're literally back-to-back in the CFP rankings at this point. So I think that was such a special day for the program and just for Gamecock fans everywhere. I mean, I actually went over to the ops building to get some video of if fans were going to come back and greet the team when they arrived from Clemson. And there were people everywhere. It might have been our most watched video on YouTube last year, now that I think about it. And so probably that and the field storming against Tennessee the week before. But that was just a special day in this state because it marked a end to a run of dominance for Clemson. And I do think that matters from a mental standpoint.
Yeah, you look, Tyler, you mentioned earlier how South Carolina sometimes in this rivalry in the games they lost had gotten off to, a poor start. You think about last year's game, you early in the game, you have the fumble that Clemson runs in for a touchdown. Clemson doesn't score an offensive touchdown in that game and wins, 16-7. I think about, was that 2017, Wes, here? You had an early pick six.
Backed up and and just threw it straight to the guy because the receiver and quarterback were not on the same page.
Yep. So you throw a pick six early. And you think about that 2022 game, both teams punted on their first couple possessions respectively, and then Spencer Rattler throws a pick six right to a guy, and you're going, oh boy.
2021, Jason Brown started at quarterback.
Yep.
Was there not an early...
I was about to go back and look, and I hadn't yet.
Was there not an early Clemson score in that game, too?
I feel like there's been
I feel like there was an early interception.
Hold on. I have it for you in a second here.
And that was like that was a tough day at the park for the Gamecocks.
There was no scoring in that game for the Gamecocks.
Well, they did. Yeah, threw an early interception, but not a pick six.
There was 3 first half interceptions in that game, actually. But yeah, no pick six.
Yeah, but, Carolina in that game, in the 2022 game, did not get off to a good start. But I remember watching Spencer Rattler and going, he seemed unbothered, right? Whereas even though Clemson was up early, DJ Uyunglele looked kind of flustered at times, right? And he was making some plays you're going, ooh, and then Clemson would have success running the ball, but then they weren't leaning on running the ball. And so you just saw throughout the game, South Carolina, you kind of saw it in real time, them overcoming some things. And the emotional roller coaster that game was, wow. I mean, think about the 4th and 1 bomb to Juju, and he almost scores, but he's down at the 1. Then you throw a pick, and it's like, man, how many different things can happen here? But South Carolina, to their credit, just continued to battle. And again, in real time, they were kind of overcoming those mental hurdles, but to where by the end of the game, you felt like they were mentally the tougher team.
Fun fact, in DJU's 2 starts against South Carolina, threw their exactly 99 yards in both games. Both times under 50% completions.
Yeah, he was not good against Carolina.
Well, he's not been really good in general in his college football career, and now he's sitting on the bench watching his team probably lose to Florida this weekend.
Yeah, I went back and looked. So, like y'all said, not a pick six, but Carolina was down 10-0, and then 17-0 at the half. So 10-0 at the end of the first quarter, 17-0 at the half in that 2021 game as well.
We'll see what the coaches have to say ahead of the rivalry game this weekend. We'll dive into all that coming up tomorrow on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on your Tuesday here in the game. Thursday would be a GC hour, so that's like extra spots that we wouldn't have. I feel like we already done it.
All right, guys, lunchtime here on the game. Great recommendation, of course, from Firehouse Subs, as always. The new Thanksgiving turkey sub. Carved turkey, cranberry, dressing, mayo, all on a sub roll. Premium carved turkey. It is outstanding. We've sampled it at Firehouse Subs. We've done more than sampled it. We've just eaten it. You should, too. FirehouseSubs.com or download the Firehouse Subs app. That's the easiest way, my preferred method for ordering delicious Firehouse Subs all the time. You can use the Rapid Rescue to Go. That means you can avoid the wait. Order online, FirehouseSubs.com, or on the app. It'll be waiting on you at any of the 15 convenient Midlands Firehouse Subs locations, no matter where you are in the Midlands. There's a Firehouse Subs close to you. Check it out using the Rapid Rescue to Go on the Firehouse Subs app. Earn yourself some rewards toward future purchases. All of your Firehouse Subs favorites and the new Thanksgiving turkey sub. Also, check out the hot sauce bar. It's back. FirehouseSubs.com.